Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
This Sunday, lawmakers from across Georgia are back at home. We're glad you're with us. I'm Rick Fulbaum.
And I'm Doug Reardon. A special legislative session has now wrapped at the state capitol.
We stand adjourned, sine die.
Of course, a much more subdued celebration at the end of the special session than we're used to seeing in the spring. The session wrapped on Tuesday after 5 legislative days. We did the math. It cost Georgia taxpayers a little over $300,000 just to keep members working under the Gold Dome. That's according to estimates from the Georgia House Democratic Caucus. The special session resulted in battles over property taxes, voting laws, and a still looming redistricting effort. But when lawmakers adjourned, everything stayed mostly the same.
I sat down with the leaders on both sides of the aisle, both now calling the special session a success. Now that we're on the other side of this special session, give yourself a grade. How did the Democrats do?
I think we did A. From our perspective, I think we did well.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I'm always going to give our team an A. And I think we went in and did our jobs. Trying to really fight hard for lower taxes, which Democrats, stood in front of. We updated the election QR code bill that Governor Kemp called us into and made a decision that we're going to take up redistricting at a future date.
An A from both sides, even though nothing was settled on the floor.
We have to fix this problem.
On redistricting, Democrats say public pressure.
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
And political blowback forced Republicans to hit pause.
House Republicans will not be taking up redistricting maps during this special session.
So when you saw the energy level that we had, and also the fact that it's a difficult process, they pulled back from it.
Republicans say they're waiting on federal court rulings tied to similar cases nationwide.
Our decision is based on we want to see what the federal courts are going to do with other cases related to these redistricting events that are happening across the country.
But as the session ended,
they say we might be back here in November.
The lieutenant governor, who urged his Republican colleagues to redraw the maps now, offered this warning.
But if we come back here to redraw lines in November, it ain't the Democrats that need to be worried.
On ballot QR codes, there was no ban. A last-minute compromise sets up a post-certification hand recount protocol for the top statewide races in razor-thin contests and creates a commission to study what voting technology should look like next.
Not doing the hand recount. So even though it's post-certification, it is still very problematic that we're going to be doing that.
What's wrong with hand recounts?
They're not accurate. You've had counties throughout the nation that have actually tried to do hand recounts, and they stopped and say, look, this is much more difficult than we thought. It's a repetitive action. It's difficult. It takes a lot of people. It also takes resources.
I think the concern a lot of Georgians have is around the QR codes and the trust with that technology. We've heard from a lot of citizens that are also interested in doing kind of print on demand if they want a paper ballot. And I think we ought to explore all options for Georgians to have options when they vote.
On property taxes, Republicans pushed a plan to let local communities vote on shifting away from property taxes towards a local sales tax option. Democrats blocked it, calling it a tax swap, not a cut.
If you own a home, you're really just replacing one tax with another. That's really what you're doing. It doesn't eliminate property taxes at all. It just says, okay, you may have a lower tax, but then we're going to replace it with a sales tax. If you don't own a home, you actually get any benefit from it. You're just being taxed. So no matter what, you're still going to have an increase in your sales tax. Most Georgians don't even want that. And so really this was a political play by the Republicans. They knew they didn't have the votes.
When I put that to Republican leadership, Anna Vitarte pushed back.
I mean, I respect Leader Jones, but I mean, that's pretty silly for him to say that. I mean, it's not a bait and switch. I mean, we've seen time and time again, the Democratic agenda in the Senate is not for the American dream. I think our vision for the future is prosperity and reigniting the American dream, while the Democrats just want the government to box families in and tell them how they have to live their lives.
And you can listen to my full interviews with Senate Majority Leader Jason Vitarte and Minority Leader Harold Jones right now on the Atlanta News First app. Scan the code on your screen to download it for free.
And joining us now to talk about it is our panel, Republican political analyst and president of Main Street Network Strategies, Julianne Thompson, Democratic State Senator Sonia Halpern, and political science professor and A&F political analyst Dr. Ben Taylor. Appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah, thanks for going on the record. And Senator, let me start with you because you were in the thick of this special session and you survived, we're happy to see. And you heard from the leader. He gave Democrats an A for how this worked out. Let's talk about the elections bill, though, the QR codes. There's going to be a committee. We don't know if Democrats are going to be on the committee. Can you really give yourself an A if you didn't get exactly what you wanted?
I think that we do get an A because when you think about how you grade on the assignment. And our assignment was really to stop worse outcomes. And we were able to successfully do that in the redistricting effort, of course, which is Republican-led power grab sweeping across the South. We were able to keep that at bay. We were able to make sure that there were no new sales taxes on everyday working families in Georgia. And we were able to also ensure that our elections were going to go this year fine. So, I mean, better than fine, right? Like we had the ability to kill an effort to do pre-certification hand counts that would have destabilized the election altogether. We were able to get the QR code pushed forward. And I think all of those things really are a win for Georgia, even if it means that any one individual can't be part of a study committee.
And Julianne, same question, but for Republicans, because we heard leader Anna Vitarte also give that party an A for the job they did, but no property taxes. Obviously no redistricting as well. Right. Do you agree with that grade?
I actually do. I think they did the job that they were sent there to do, considering all of the surrounding circumstances. First of all, when it comes to passing property taxes, there were a lot of local initiatives that were put forward, local ballot initiatives, but as we all know, it takes a 2/3 majority in both houses, both chambers to pass a local initiative to put on the ballot. So they were in a situation where that was concerned, that they didn't want to be disingenuous with the electorate and basically kick the can down the road and pretend that they accomplished something that they didn't. And leader Anna Vitarte was very strategic in his comments about the fact that they are preparing for the long term. They're preparing legislation for the future that's going to help Georgia citizens be able to purchase a home, to be able to afford a home, to be able to pursue the American dream. And that's not something that you do in the short term. That takes long-term strategy and preparation.
Yeah, and Ben, we're talking about maybe the future coming sooner than even the next legislative session. Talk of another special session, potentially to recircle back to this redistricting issue. How rare would that be?
Well, it would be extremely rare. Since 1983, Georgia has only had one instance of 2 special sessions in the same calendar year. That was in 2001, and actually, that was also about redistricting. And what's notable is that Democrats were in power then, Republicans are in power now. But in both instances, the strategy was trying to figure out how to preserve the majority's capacity to remain the majority in an increasingly competitive state. And so we've seen it, before, and we're seeing it again. So if a second special session happens, that's sort of what you're watching.
Senator, we heard from the lieutenant governor sort of at the end of the session, warning his fellow Republicans, look, if we're back here in November doing this, it's not the Democrats who are going to be in trouble. What do you think he was referring to there? And really, I mean, isn't this just sort of a short-lived victory for Democrats? I mean, these maps are going to be redrawn.
So the maps are going to be redrawn. The question is when, right? They're not scheduled to be redrawn at this point until we get past the next census. So it may in fact be that we just delayed it. And for us, that delay matters because it did keep, the maps as they are right now, which means that we're not going to see a dilution in the kind of voting power of different communities, particularly Black and brown communities. But I think that there is an overall sense that this year, which is a huge election year, may bring in some Democratic leadership, which the state hasn't seen in 2 decades plus. And so I think that's really what he was hinting at, that if they are back redrawing maps before we get to January, it is because that we have seen some Democratic wins come out of November's election.
Was this sort of a premonition on the part of the Lieutenant Governor, Julianne, that maybe the election in November might not go as we Republicans, in his words, would like it to go?
Well, I suspect that that is what he was getting at, but I don't necessarily agree with him. I think that with regard to redistricting, it would have been impossible to do that right now. I mean, we're in the middle of an election, so it just seems ridiculous to think about that right now. So I think that the legislature did the right thing by pushing that forward. And also, you know, it's a strategic move on behalf of Republicans, because if they would have tried that right now, it most certainly would have drawn up a lot of Democratic voters for November who felt disenfranchised by redistricting. So I think that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and Ben, we asked the leaders of both parties, give yourself a grade. We heard A's across the board. I wish that was what my report card looked like, and if you could give yourself a grade, it probably would have. But you give both parties a grade now, and maybe more importantly, what grade did voters get out of this special session?
Well, I think, you know, we've heard both sides say, well, we did what we wanted to do. And I think that's probably true. But as far as voters are concerned, what we want, what any voter wants, I think, what the general public wants, is that for elected officials to come together, solve problems, and not create problems. And that happened. Like, the problem they had was the QR code deadline for July 1st. That got solved. The election system is secure, it's accurate, and we're going forward with it. There have been slight changes, but in general, it's there. And they didn't create more problems than they solved. And I think voters appreciate that.
Thank you, all three. Please sit tight for a moment. Next on the record, the race for governor. One Georgia candidate now demanding their opponent meet them on the debate stage. Welcome back. Georgia's nationally watched midterm elections are now about 5 months away.
But this morning, the Democratic nominee in the race for governor is already applying pressure to her opponent. It's early in the cycle, but former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is challenging Rick Jackson to 3 televised debates. The gambit, if it happens, would result in the largest number of general election gubernatorial debates in more than a decade. The Bottoms camp also outlined a framework for when and where these could all unfold. The former mayor is calling for 3 televised debates hosted across different regions in Georgia, with one of the matchups incorporating a town hall format and the last of the debates falling at least 2 weeks before the November 3rd election. During a radio interview last week, Jackson seemed open to a debate with Bottoms.
But he stopped short of accepting the former mayor's specific 3-debate challenge. When we reached out to the Jackson campaign, a spokesperson told us in a statement, quote, Rick looks forward to contrasting his plan to lower taxes, improve affordability, strengthen education, grow jobs, and increase public safety, with Keisha Lance Bottoms' failed record of massive spending increases, higher fees, and skyrocketing crime.
And as the general cycle heats up, Democrats are trying to project party unity.
Last night, Bottoms and U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff appeared together at their second joint campaign rally, this time in Savannah. Senator Ossoff is fighting to defend his U.S. Senate seat from Trump-endorsed Republican Congressman Mike Collins. Georgia's Republican Party is working to employ a similar unified ticket ahead of November. Last week, Mike Collins and Republican nominees for several of Georgia's top officers met with supporters at the Georgia State Fairgrounds for the GOP rodeo in Perry, Georgia. Gubernatorial nominee Rick Jackson was notably absent from the event. And we're back with the panel. So, Ben, we talk about how important these debates are for voters. Are they also important for the candidates?
Oh, absolutely. Debates serve a very important civic function. So voters get to learn about the candidates. Candidates have to respond in real time. You kind of get a sense of how they would be on the spot in sort of critical moments. But the other component to this is, and strategic and savvy candidates understand, is that it's a media opportunity. And, you know, a good candidate, a good campaign is going to be able to present their information to the voters, but also use that information to capture things for later television commercials or other things. So, yeah, debates are very, very important. Particularly when you have 2 candidates who sort of need to reach out to voters who may not know them as well as they would like.
Yeah, and Julianne, Rick Jackson was kind of non-committal, to say the least. I think he even went on after he gave us that statement to say, well, of course I'll debate her, but didn't commit to anything, solidly. He seems maybe a little hesitant at this point, at least, to commit to these debates. Do you think that's the case? Why do you think he might not want to get up there on stage with Keisha Lance Bottoms?
I don't see that as an issue at all. He's been very forthright that he will debate Keisha Lance Bottoms. He was just on the Shelley Winter show where he was asked that very question by Shelley, and he said absolutely that he looked forward to debating Keisha Lance Bottoms and drawing a strong contrast between his campaign and her. And I look forward to the debates because I know that he's going to do extremely well in them. And I have no doubt in my mind that he is going to dominate that debate.
All right. Let's talk about Keisha Lance Bottoms here, Senator, because she is now running against an opponent who has an unlimited amount of money and has shown a willingness to spend whatever it takes in order to win. First, the nomination, and I've been in touch with his campaign, and they said to expect the same kind of thing in this general campaign. How do you wage a campaign? How do you go up against somebody who has an open checkbook like that?
So everybody knows, as I like to say, that money is the mother's milk of a campaign. So we know that resources matter, money does matter, I won't pretend that it doesn't, but it's not the only thing that matters. So does connection. And as we were just talking about with the debates, as one example of allowing a candidate to come and connect with voters, to really get in front of voters and tell voters what it is that they stand for, how they will be leaders in the areas that Georgians care about. We know that Georgians, it doesn't really matter the political stripe, they are looking for a candidate who can understand their daily struggles and has an answer, a solution, and policies that they will use to address it should they get elected. Yeah. And Keisha Lance Bottoms, she will make that case in every corner of the state. And she knows that she needs to do that.
And she's doing it alongside Jon Ossoff, of course. Ben, we've seen this attempt almost to run as a ticket on the Democratic side as well as the Republican side. Rick Jackson and Mike Collins have shown each other support. Is this a good idea for everybody involved? Does it work?
It can work. And the real factors are, what you're trying to do is mobilize voters and raise name ID and put the connection to it, because all of these offices are independent. You want to show everybody we've got a unified ticket, as we've been describing, and sort of the parties all moving together. And that's good. It could be the rising tide that lifts all boats. Alternatively, if a candidate is not as good as one of the others, then you could create a detrimental effect down the ticket, and that creates problems. So really, time will tell. It will, because both parties are doing it. I think we'll have an interesting sort of experiment, if you will, to see how it works. But anyway, that's the idea, and we'll have to see if it works.
Well, Julianne, are both sides doing it? I mean, we showed the rodeo. Rick Jackson wasn't there.
I wasn't there.
You weren't there either. Okay, well, fair enough. But I'm just wondering. I mean, it might be a little. They might be a little nervous on the Jackson side to be campaigning with Mike Collins, in that he is somebody who I think a lot of people see as more extreme and someone who has perhaps some ethics investigations that are going on. Is that maybe why he didn't show up at the rodeo?
Both Rick Jackson and Mike Collins have endorsed each other formally. So I think that they have made very clear that they are supportive of each other. But I think that Rick Jackson is concerned about his campaign and concerned about focusing on running his campaign against Keisha Lance Bottoms. Mike Collins is focused on running his campaign against Jon Ossoff. They're two extremely important races. They're nationally watched. They're huge, and they need to focus on their own races. But as far as support is concerned, they've shown Georgians that they endorse, through endorsing each other, that they're very supportive of each other.
Right, and Senator, like Ben said, it works. This type of ticket approach to this works until it doesn't, right? There are a good amount of voters in Atlanta, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, who don't remember Keisha Lance Bottoms' time at City Hall very fondly, especially when it comes to some of what happened in 2020, the dealings with COVID, the not running for a second term. Do you see that as something that Senator Ossoff needs to be careful of in terms of, tying his campaign to hers?
No, and I'll say kind of what we just heard here about each candidate does need to also run their own race and get into voters, in front of voters, and tell voters why the voters should vote for them. All of that work will happen individually. And then it is important to show unity. I mean, what we have in Senator Ossoff and Mayor Bottoms is a unified ticket that all is in agreement around their commitment of what it will take to move Georgia forward. And the ability to be able to share that also jointly matters as well.
All right, thank you all. More from our panel to come, and also still ahead, a new set of rules for Georgians to follow. Lots of new laws taking effect Wednesday across the Peach State. Welcome back. This week, a new set of rules are set to take effect across Georgia.
July 1st is the start of the new fiscal year here in Georgia, and that's when a lot of new laws will take effect, including the Georgia Human Trafficking Prevention Training Act. The measure requires specialized training for people working at inns and short-term rental properties. It also creates record-keeping expectations and outlines penalties for non-compliance.
Another new one, the odometer tampering law makes it a felony. It greatly increases as well the minimum civil payout for victims if someone tampers, quote, this is a quote, with intent to defraud. The violator is now liable for triple the actual damages, or up to $10,000. The bill severely raises the stakes for title fraud tied to mileage as well.
Also taking effect this week, the Georgia Property Owners Bill of Rights Act. The measure creates protections against their property and homeowners associations.
ANF investigator Anastasia almost uncovered some HOA nightmares across the state.
The new law addresses one of the biggest issues we uncovered in HOA nightmares: people at risk of losing their homes due to fines for things like not pressure washing their house or having faded shutters. Homeowners who fight the fines often rack up thousands of dollars in court costs. The law doubles the minimum in unpaid dues, not fines or fees, that an association needs before it can file to foreclose. It's now $4,000. The bill goes into effect in 2 phases. Starting July 1st, an HOA cannot charge homeowners attorney's fees without prior written notice stating what the fines are and providing an itemized list of reasonable attorney's fees that they're claiming. The rest goes into effect January 1st. That's when all property associations must register with the Georgia Secretary of State if they're going to issue fines and fees. They must also provide required records to the state for homeowners to view, including governing documents and finances. Homeowners and HOA board members can also then report their complaints to the office for an investigation and possible hearing.
I'm Anastasia Olmos, Atlanta News First.
Next on the record, new rules for running elections are set to take effect with just 1 month until the state's next special election.
Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
Well, this Sunday, delayed action on redistricting, differing definitions of tax relief, and new rules for how elections are run across Georgia. A special legislative session is officially over at the Capitol, and we're glad you're with us today. I'm Doug Reardon.
And I'm Rick Fulbaum. After 5 days of tense debate, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are claiming victory. For Democrats, it's their successful block of a measure that Republicans say was a push to provide property tax relief to homeowners. Leaders on the left say the measure would have heaped new taxes on renters. The plan would have let citizens vote on whether to reduce their property tax bills in favor of a 1-cent floating local sales tax. That's 1 penny for every dollar spent on retail items.
And lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are commending a decision not to redraw the state's political maps. Republican leaders rejected the governor's call to redistrict, but only for now. House Speaker John Burns said he didn't want to rush the process and wants to hold hearings where citizens can weigh in on this. It could mean another special session, maybe focused solely on redistricting later this year. It's something Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones warned lawmakers about on the final day of this special session.
You know, they say we might be back here in November. If we come back here to redraw lines in November, it ain't the Democrats that need to be worried.
A late compromise in the House quieted some of the calls on the right to revamp the way ballots are cast and counted here in Georgia. Republican leaders pushed through a measure that delays the date when Georgia's current voting system that uses QR codes to tally up ballots would have been outlawed. That law was set to take effect this Wednesday. Senate Bill 3X now delays the deadline until 2028. But it also sets up a committee to recommend what Georgia's next voting system should look like, and adds a provision requiring hand recounts of ballots when either the governor or lieutenant governor races are extremely close. Lawmakers approving that measure as election workers verify the results of this month's runoff election.
Atlanta News First reporter Abby Kasouris spoke with those election administrators about the new changes and how quickly they'll have to make them.
20 10-sided dice, one long number. That number feeds a computer and spits out which ballot batches get pulled for a hand count. Over the next few days, all 159 counties will hand count 2 contests from the June 16th runoff. Inside the count room, it looks more like a lab than a polling place. Workers in gloves, no phone or pictures allowed, moving ballot stacks one at a time, sorting, counting, and double-checking totals before comparing the hand count to what the scanners reported.
It adds transparency and trust to the process, and it provides an opportunity for our counties to look at the human-readable text, come up with counts of batches of ballots, and then compare those to the machines.
We already have the tables set up.
Rockdale County Election Supervisor Cynthia Willingham says voters don't usually see this because it happens after certification.
After the election and the votes are certified by the counties, we're still counting ballots.
A bill expands audits and triggers automatic hand recounts in tight races starting on July 1st. Rockdale is one of 6 counties that have to implement those changes almost immediately. A special election called for the 13th Congressional District to replace late Congressman David Scott.
Since 2020, we have performed risk limit audits or hand count. The difference this time is multiple races.
She's not worried about July. She's worried about November. Willingham says if the hand count and machine count don't match, the law doesn't clearly spell out what comes next.
If there's a discrepancy between the hand count and the machine count, how do you resolve it? Which one do you go with?
Awaiting direction from the Secretary of State's office, the 6 counties could become the test case, working out staffing, training, and timing for a uniform approach in November.
Abby Kasoris, Atlanta News First.
And let's welcome in our panel, Republican political analyst and president of Main Street Network Strategies, Julianne Thompson, Democratic State Senator Sonia Halperin, who represents Georgia's 39th Senate District, and political science professor and Atlanta News First political analyst, Dr. Ben Taylor. Thank you all three for being here, going on the record. Ben, let me start with you, and let's revisit this elections bills and the commission that's going to be established that may or may not include any Democratic voices to figure all of this out. First of all, is there any requirement that this commission be bipartisan? And why wouldn't the Republicans want to have some input from Democrats?
Well, in my reading of the bill, as I understand it, the Speaker is mainly in charge of selecting the folks who are going to be like a large part of the membership of that committee. And I think that the idea is that he will add some Democrats or a Democrat or something to this effect. So there's no absolute requirement that it happens. And I don't think it behooves anyone for this to be seen as a partisan issue. And this is really important about election administration generally. This should not be a partisan issue. I think all of us as voters want our elections to be accurate. We want them to be fair. We want them to be timely counted in a timely way. And so I think everyone has that as an incentive structure. So I think that you would see the Speaker and other folks in leadership try to make sure that this is done, as well as they possibly can do it.
Yeah, and Julianne, talk to us about this bill. This was obviously a Republican-led effort. They seem very happy with the way that this is going to go. And also, if you could, speak to the fact that, there may not be Democrats as part of this process to select this new method.
Well, I don't know what members and senators are going to be selected, so I can't really speak to that. That would be up to the leaders. However, I do think that there is a slight rift in the way Republicans feel about this. While the legislature feels like that this was a win, there's a lot of Republican base voters that feel like they kicked the can down the road. They don't trust the QR code system. They don't trust our current voting system in Georgia. So a lot of them are very unhappy with the fact that it was not better addressed this session. That being said, I know that our legislators worked hard. And I know that they feel that they accomplished what they set out to.
Let's talk about the taxes, Senator, because you were there, you were a part of this debate, and the Democrats were able to stave off this property tax effort that the Republicans wanted to put forward. But let's talk about the message that that Democrats need to send to their constituents who are homeowners and who may be dealing with some financial hardship as a result of these property taxes that go up and up and up. What is the message from Democrats to homeowners that we are here for you, we're going to help you with this?
So we absolutely are. There is no Democrat that I have spoken to that does not understand that homeowners need some relief. And that is something that we have tried to deliver for homeowners through other bills, including a bill that we supported last session, and others that we've actually put forward ourselves that would really provide targeted homeowner property tax relief for those who need it the most. while not actually impacting negatively through a new sales tax those who don't even own homes. So really, we just did not believe in an additional sales tax when we know that everybody is feeling escalating costs, whether that's through groceries. Gas is 25% higher year over year than it was last May. Inflation is at 4%. It's the highest it's been since April of 2023, which is that people don't have the pathway to the on-ramp to the American dream and home ownership to begin with. Affordability across the board is too high, and there's other things that we can do without destabilizing also our local communities and counties, the schools and public safety and all the other things that the revenue from property tax goes towards that citizens also want.
Yeah, and Julianne, is it, I guess fair would be the word, to make people who are not homeowners kind of imposing this local option sales tax on them when they don't see any benefit from reduced property taxes? I think that was kind of the ethos of the Democratic argument, was you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you're making these renters, sometimes businesses, make up the cost of property tax relief.
I think so many voters feel like you never fully own your home, even when you pay your mortgage off, because you're always paying money to the government. And that's got to change. And I think that the vast majority of voters on both sides of the aisle in Georgia would say that that needs to change. That being said, we didn't have 2/3 majority in both chambers to be able to pass local ballot initiatives. So Republicans are working on something very strategic and more robust for the future.
Coming up next on The Record, President Trump now putting a historic housing bill on ice. This Sunday, a historic bill aimed at lowering the cost of housing has now hit a Donald Trump-sized roadblock, even after lawmakers from both sides of the aisle voted to approve it. The president said he would not sign the bill until Congress passes what's known as the Save America Act. That legislation, as we've been discussing, would require voters to show a proof of citizenship with a government-issued ID that shows where you were born, like a birth certificate or a passport. Democrats point out that it's already illegal for non-Americans to vote and say the act is an attempt to suppress minority voters. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act passed the House and Senate last week with bipartisan support and included a provision introduced by Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock that would have banned large corporations from mass purchasing single-family homes. Senator Warnock said President Trump's refusal to sign the legislation is just another example of him prioritizing his own agenda over helping working families.
The bill that he refused to sign today would have given a leg up to Americans who have been exploited by corporate landlords. Ordinary people looking to buy a home cannot compete with billionaires and trillionaires. And the president refused to help you.
In a social media post last week, President Trump said passing the Save America Act is a, quote, national emergency. And he told reporters the best way to lower housing costs is to lower interest rates.
I know housing better than anybody, maybe anywhere. It's all about the interest rate. Lower the interest rates, you can have all the housing you want.
Back with our panel now to talk about this. We know that corporate land ownership is a huge problem in Metro Atlanta. Somewhere around 30% of the stock is owned by corporations. It butts single families out of being able to buy these homes. The GOP has, of course, acknowledged this is an issue. But is this the bill that President Trump should be holding hostage in favor of the Save America Act?
Well, it's most definitely an important issue to all voters on both sides of the aisle, and it's an issue across the country where a lot of state legislatures are taking this bill or taking this issue into consideration and changing laws in their own states with regard to corporate ownership and foreign corporate ownership. Yes, it is an important issue, an important part of this bill that I believe needs to move forward. Both houses or both chambers have passed a veto majority proof bill, and it has gone to the president. We know that he is saying that he wants the Save America Act to pass and that that's important to him. It's also important to him to lower mortgage rates. But the interesting thing is that Speaker Johnson yesterday formally presented the bill to the president. So now they have 10 days. They have 10 days to decide what is going to happen. If the president signs the bill within 10 days, of course, it becomes law. If the president does nothing to the bill and Congress is in session, it becomes law. But if this 10 days expires during recess and the president does nothing, he doesn't have to veto it. If it expires during recess, the bill dies. And this bill is scheduled, the 10th day is July 7th, and Congress will be in recess. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few days.
Okay, so this is the debate going on in Washington, Senator. Let's talk about the debate under the Gold Dome, because state lawmakers have tried to address this as well. But I wonder, because obviously we have lawmakers from parts of the state where this is not an issue. You talk to your colleagues who represent rural districts around the state of Georgia. Do you think that they understand, that they grasp how important a subject this is?
I do. I actually do. Because it doesn't really matter where you live in this state, urban, rural, everybody is feeling the housing issue. And when you look at the statistic that is saying now the average first-time home buyer is 38 years old, that is much older than you would anticipate. And that's kind of unilaterally. So I think that everybody understands. I sit on the Finance Committee. We had several bills even this session in which we were trying to deal specifically with corporate home owners and really narrowing how many somebody could own so that they can't just buy up all the stock. We have absolutely had other measures that we've passed that force somebody, if they're absent or live in another state, to have a registered agent right here in Georgia. So, I mean, even us as a Georgia General Assembly, we have already taken some steps because we all understand the importance of this issue.
And, you know, you and I were there every day of that session, and it did seem to be one of those things that Republicans and Democrats had an appetite to work together on. It just maybe was out-prioritized by other things. So, you know, Ben, the president mentioned this issue in his most recent State of the Union address. So obviously this is on his mind. But kind of the same question that we asked Julianne as well. Why would he pick this particular bill when it was something clearly that he acknowledged as a problem to make the center of this fight over the SAVE Act?
Well, presidents do this. They act strategically to get things they want. In this case, the SAVE Act is something President Trump has been talking about for some time. But what's notable about this is that usually presidents choose issues that have, maybe Congress has passed a bill, but it's usually not by a veto-proof majority like this one is. And so we've talked a little bit about sort of the constitutional process for a bill becoming law without the president's signature. But the really important component of this is the political piece, which is there are real sort of policy implications, of course. But politically, this was a big victory for President Trump. They were going to have a massive signing ceremony. People were flying in. It was going to be a big Republican victory lap. Democrats were going to be happy about it as well. And now all of that is gone. And what's left is more partisan bickering. And so I think when Americans see this, it puts a distaste about politics in their mouth. It sort of typifies exactly why they sometimes want to withdraw from the political process or think that, you know, kick all the bums out kind of sentiment.
Stand by, please. When we come back, On the Record remembers a legendary, longtime voice in Georgia politics. On the Record this Sunday, Georgia is remembering a longtime radio personality and political commentator, Martha Zoller, who died suddenly last week at the age of 67, just days after she announced that she was stepping away from her radio show. Zoller had been a mainstay on the airwaves since 1994. She ran for Congress back in 2012. And Julianne, I know that Martha Zoller was a friend of yours, a colleague of yours. She was a conservative, but she had friends and admirers on both sides of the political spectrum.
She did. Everyone loved Martha Zoller. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman and a good friend of mine for about 20 years. I'm going to miss her terribly. This was a huge shock. Martha and I used to have lunches together at Aquaterra Bistro in Buford. We would meet there regularly because that was a good place between where the two of us lived. And yeah, I'm going to miss talking to her and just all that she offered to so many people. She was kind, she was loving, and my daughter, who she was a great role model for women, by the way. And my daughter, who is in her third year, going into her third year of law school right now, her very first political campaign that she ever was a part of to do any sort of volunteering was when she was around 12 or 13 years old, when she was on Martha Zoller's campaign and did a lot of volunteering for her. And I posted a picture recently of my daughter with Martha and with Herman Cain together because Herman had supported Martha. And what a treasure that picture is for me to have. Two very important people in the conservative Republican world, but two people that were so loved by so many. And Martha is going to be missed so much. And we love you, Martha.
Yeah, and of course our condolences to you and to her family and all of her colleagues and friends. And Senator, you know, one of the really redeeming things about Zeller was that she was able to communicate on both sides of the aisle very effectively at that. Is that something that we need more of?
You need more of that. We do. I did not personally know her, but I was shocked. We were in the chamber when the news came through, and I was as shocked as anybody. She really is a serious journalist. She was a voice forever. Like, if you have been following Georgia politics, you know Martha's voice. And while we may not have always agreed on all of the issues, I think that I deeply respected the seriousness by which she came at the conversations. And yes, we do. Hyper-partisanship is really divisive. We need the ability to be able to sit and talk and debate, and sometimes we'll walk away agreeing, and sometimes we won't. But I think that Martha really represents somebody who believed in that.
Well, thanks for helping us remember her, and thanks for being here today, Julianne and Ben and Senator Halpern. Thanks for your time. And that's our show for today. Thanks so much for joining us.